I love photographs, and I think what Dr. Luther is doing and going to talk about super interesting to everybody. It's one of my personal interests. We've got a lot of folks here on the team that are interested in photographs. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Luther before he begins. He's associate professor of computer science, and then he has, and it says here at the bottom of the slide, by courtesy, history. So he has seen the better side here of every. We could have used you earlier when we had our technical issue outside. He is the senior editor of Military Images magazine, in which he has published a column on Civil War photo sleuthing since 2014. He is the project director for Civil War Photo Sleuth, a website for identifying unknown Civil War portraits that have been featured by Time, Smithsonian, and the History Channel. We want to thank Dr. Luther for being with us today, and I will turn it over to him. Please help me welcome Dr. Kurt Luther. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Thank you, Wayne, for that wonderful introduction. It's great to be here in Gettysburg. It's an honor and one of my favorite places, talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is Civil War photo sleuthing, as you can see here. And we're going to talk about the past, present, and future, all in one talk slot. So I've got a lot of slides. It's a very visual presentation. Buckle up, because we've got a lot to get through. So what does past, present, and future mean? First, we're talking about the past of Civil War photo sleuthing. What did it look like during the Civil War era and in the decades immediately following it? Then, what does it look like today? What are people currently doing? What challenges do they run into? What kind of cool stories can we share about that? And then finally, the future of photo sleuthing. What might it look like in the future? That's where I'm going to talk about some of the technologies that we've been building that Wayne referred to that you all could use as well to kind of see where this is all going into the future. So just a quick recap about Civil War photography in general. The Civil War is an amazing time to study photography because it's really one of the first times that it becomes accessible to the general public, and that at the same time we have this tremendous war breaking out. So this war ends up being one of the first, arguably the first widely documented war through photography. So you have soldiers going off to war. They want photos of their loved ones to bring with them. The family members left behind, they want photos of their soldiers going off to war. And so they can afford to do that. And so it really just takes off and becomes a phenomenon. And you know, photography is so important to us today. It's a big part of our culture today. It was a big part of the culture back then too. It very quickly caught on. You can see in this evocative image how important it was to folks back then. This is Freeman Mason holding a photo of his brother, Michael Mason, killed at the Battle of Savage's Station, both 17th Vermont Infantry. Look at this. He wants his photo to be part of this, his brother's photo to be part of this image. The power is there, and the power continues on through the rest of the war. Now, even while this war is going on, people are starting to do photo sleuthing. So one of the big frustrations we're going to run into is that we want to know who these people are in these photographs, but a lot of the times they didn't bother to write the names on them. They knew who these people were. They didn't need to document it for future generations. Very famous story from Gettysburg that many of you may know. A soldier is killed at the battle here. His body is unidentified. Dog tags weren't really a thing yet. Some folks had identification badges, many didn't. But they find this soldier's body, and he's holding a photograph of 3 children. And there's no other information about him or those children. There's a national campaign to try to figure out who they are. And by extension, who he is, who the soldier is. These photos were widely reproduced and distributed around the country. And amazingly, it worked. They were able to figure out the name of this soldier. He's Sergeant Amos Humiston, 154th New York. And those are his children. So even while the war is going on, we start to see this photo sleuthing. Also, while the war is going on, people are mailing photographs back and forth. Soldiers at the front sending them back to home, folks at home sending photos to their loved ones. And you know, soldiers are moving around, addresses are changing. A lot of these letters get lost in the mail. They don't reach their intended target right away. It turns out there's a special office in the US Postal Service called the Dead Letter Office that focuses just on this problem of trying to get these letters where they're supposed to be. And so as the war progresses, hundreds, thousands of these envelopes end up getting lost in the mail. The soldier isn't there, the address isn't correct, whatever it is. So there's staff that are charged with figuring this out. And they tend to hire clergy and women because they think they're more trustworthy. And so these are the folks that are legally allowed to investigate these envelopes. First, they do what's called a blind reading. They try to figure out the address from reading the envelope. If that doesn't work, they're allowed to open it up and start rooting around inside and reading the letter's contents and figuring out where this might be headed, who's mentioned in the letter, that sort of thing. And oftentimes there's photos in those envelopes. So one of the postal workers had this idea that maybe we could post the photographs up on a big board in this dead letter office. And as folks walk by, people come into the post office, they'll see these, maybe they'll recognize one of these faces. If they recognize the face, then you can see there's a little red number written down there. We can match that number to the actual letter and the envelope, and then maybe get this where it's supposed to go. Supposedly between 5,000 and 15,000 of these were accumulated over the years. And they were mounted on these big 4x9 placards with these brass clips. You can still see the brass clips on all these photos today and the red lettering if you're looking for them, if you know where to look. So as the war ends, there's still thousands of these left over. And people are just trying to get them back to where they belong. This might be the last letter that a soldier ever sent to their family. So the World's Fairs are really popular around this time. And the idea comes up to, let's take all of these big placards of photos of Civil War soldiers, put them into a big album, like you see there, and they actually built a custom wooden cradle to put these giant pages of this photo album into. And we'll take this to different World's Fairs. Again, you have thousands of people, millions of people passing through over the course of months. Maybe they'll see somebody they recognize. Apparently this worked too. All these black ones are spaces where the photo was claimed and taken out. According to one account, many of these pictures have reached their families for which they originally intended. As you can see in this example, this is a book from, I think, the late 19th century. One of my other favorite stories here, an Omaha woman browsing an album in the government building at the Trans-Mississippi Exhibition discovers a wartime photo of her father, J.J. Gorman. He's a Civil War veteran, Company D, 86th Indiana. He mailed the photo from Camp Carrington, Indianapolis, to his family in South Bend in 1862. So 35 years later, his family finally receives the photograph. And Gorman, the soldier, was so pleased, he sends a thank you letter to the exhibit director, and he writes, quote, "I'm greatly obliged at the return of the picture." So time passes, and some of these photo sleuths are very successful. So let's jump forward in time a little bit to the present day. What does photo sleuthing look like 160 years later? The landscape has clearly changed quite a bit. None of those soldiers, of course, are still with us. Generations have passed, but many of their photos remain. And the question becomes, what can we learn about them today? So nobody knows exactly how many Civil War photos survive today. A few experts have tried to estimate. Ron Coddington estimates that there's at least 4 million portraits of Union soldiers alone that survive today. That's a conservative estimate. However, as we've talked about, only a small percentage, maybe 10 or 20%, are actually identified. The rest are a mystery. But people want to figure out who they are. Lots of different kinds of people. Historians, genealogists, archivists, collectors, dealers, folks like you and me, trying to figure out who these folks are. And they're using a variety of tools. Clearly they have new methods that weren't available tens and hundreds of years ago. For example, social media is increasingly popular. Groups on Facebook and other platforms where people can talk about these photos, share them, and help each other out. So why do people do this? As part of my research at Virginia Tech, we did interviews with a bunch of modern day photo sleuths to try to understand where they're coming from. And maybe some of these motivations will resonate with you, maybe all of them will. One of them is certainly the thrill of being a detective, solving a mystery. The more info we have, it's this big jigsaw puzzle. Other folks just love the stories that they can learn about each of these individuals. Every soldier had some story or experience, and when there's a name, you can bring it out and share it with others. Helping out descendants, people living today. I want to help these people put together the information where somebody else 50 years later can look at it and say, that's my great-great-great-grandfather, or whatever. And then finally, of course, making money. They're collectibles, they're valuable pieces of cultural heritage, and an identified photo tends to be worth a lot more than an unidentified one. We also asked these folks about what their process is that they go through. What does it look like to do photo identification nowadays, 160 years later? I don't have time to go through all the steps, but there's a few that I want to highlight that are going to be relevant to us as we talk through the rest of this presentation. So focus on looking for clues, performing the search, and weighing the evidence. So one of the early steps, looking for clues, okay? From an unknown photograph, what can we figure out? Surprisingly, quite a lot. So on the front of the photograph, obviously the face is valuable, but we also look at the uniform, the weapons, the insignia on the uniform, different photographers' props that may be present. The backdrop is often unique, and even the border of the mount, whether there's one line or two lines or one thick and thin line, those can help date the photo as well. On the back, you may have absolutely nothing and it's completely blank. That one's a little bit harder. Or you may have some other clues. Things like the name of the photographer, the location of his studio, maybe a tax stamp, which helps to date the image to a couple of years. And if you're really lucky, you have an inscription like this one with the name of the soldier in the unit. But again, that's only the case maybe 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10 times. So once you go through this process of identifying the clues, you have some sense of who this soldier is, you start looking for reference imagery. And this is where things can get really slow and really tedious. In fact, photo sleuths that do this a lot, they kind of have their own rules sometimes for what they'll even bother doing. These couple here say, if it's not a major officer, high-ranking officer, I'm not even going to try. The odds of finding the reference image are just too long. And in particular, trying to identify privates is almost impossible, which is really unfortunate, right? Because most Civil War soldiers were privates, and that's a lot of ancestors, and that's a lot of important historical figures as well. Let me show you what this looks like for what should be an easy example, which is a very high-ranking soldier, a Union officer, potentially general officer. So who is this guy? In particular, the one in the middle. Let's see if we can figure out the identity of this soldier. What we'll do first is look for clues. We'll take a look at the uniform. This is a general officer, so there's some pretty familiar uniform elements here. We've got the standard Brigadier General frock coat with the double breasts, and we have the hat and general's hat cord. Okay, we have a good sense of the rank here. So this one must be pretty easy. If it's a general, how many generals could there be in the Civil War? Well, it turns out quite a lot. Maybe you already know this. Just Union generals, we have over 500 of these to look through. There's a great reference book for this. If you happen to own that reference book or you can get access to it, you can start to page through these. If you don't, well, you're in trouble. But if you page through these 583, you're actually not going to find this guy. You've unfortunately been duped, because although he's wearing this uniform, he is not a brigadier general. He's actually a brevet brigadier general. And he has been given this honorary rank, and he has chosen to wear the uniform that matches that rank. However, there is another book for brevet brigadier generals. This one's a little bit thicker. So if you're paging through these 1,400, eventually in the R section, you will come to George Rutherford, and you will find a match. Now, this guy's pretty unique looking, so there's a pretty good chance when you see him that you're going to recognize him. But we're not just going to stop there. That's not the kind of photo sleuthing that we do or that our experts told us about. We need to be a little bit more involved, a little bit more rigorous. So we want to weigh the evidence. What else do we know about this image that we can compare to what we know about the candidate, George Rutherford? Well, it's an Alex Gardner CDV. It's got a Washington, D.C. backmark. Not a particularly good one because that really doesn't narrow it down much at all. They're talking about many tens of thousands of soldiers there. But we do have this tax stamp, and the tax stamp helps us narrow it down between 1864 and 66. So presumably this soldier should be in the DC area between 64 and 66. Well, that matches his biography. We can see here he came in as a captain in 1863. He was in the quartermaster's department. He spent the whole war in DC, progressed through the ranks. Most importantly, he was breveted, backdated to 65 like many of the brevets, and he came out of the Army in 1866. So this fits. This guy would have been in DC, and he would have been wearing that uniform between the period of time that this photograph was taken. Now, what we want to be able to do is to make a convincing story here without having to stretch too much. As one of the experts says, if you have to sit there and explain the image and tell this long-winded story about why it's your guy, it's probably not who you say it is. So, what's the saying? If you're explaining, you're losing. Sometimes that applies here to photo sleuthing as well. Let me tell you another example. Tell me about another example of how we do photo sleuthing today. One of my favorite examples that I worked on recently that relates to Gettysburg. So here's a really cool photograph from the Library of Congress showing a group of men here at Gettysburg. And in fact, we know a little bit more than that. The Library of Congress gives this the caption of Unidentified Civil War Veterans, Battery F, Pennsylvania, Independent Light Artillery, Hampton's Battery, at the monument to the combined C and F batteries in Gettysburg. So Hampton's Battery, pretty interesting unit. If you don't know about them, it's a consolidation of two companies, both from Pittsburgh. That's Hampton's Battery. Battery F was formerly led by Robert Hampton. He was killed just before Gettysburg at Chancellorsville, so they ended up combining the two units under the command of Battery C, which was James Thompson. So it's Hampton's Battery, but James Thompson's in charge of both of these. They see significant action at Gettysburg, most notably at the Peach Orchard, July 2nd. Private Casper Carlisle receives the Medal of Honor for his efforts to save one of the battery's guns under heavy fire. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But we don't know much about this photo other than the caption that we see here from the Library of Congress. We see there's 22 men here. Some of them are wearing civilian clothing or civilian clothing with reunion badges. Others are wearing 1880s era Army uniforms. So let's go through our process. Let's look for clues. First, we recognize this is the Hampton's Battery Monument that's over by the Pennsylvania Monument. So we don't want to take anything here for granted. Just because it's in the Library of Congress caption doesn't mean it's true. Luckily, we recognize this. We've seen it before, so we can say with some confidence, okay, this is definitely taken at the Hampton Battery Monument here in Gettysburg. What else do we see? There's a couple of interesting banners or flags. This one says a few things, but most importantly, Hampton Battery F, Independent Pennsylvania Light Artillery, presented to Hampton Battery B, NGP, March 24th, 1892. There's a guide on over here with a similar kind of text on it. And then we have these gentlemen underneath here, who, as we have mentioned, are not yet identified. On the back, there's a lot of really good stuff here as well. There's an inscription that says it was taken in Gettysburg in 1894. Great, mystery solved. Or is it? Another sketch over here says August 1894, getting even more specific. It says NG encampment. It says property of J.E. Marquis. And then there's another name here, Alfred Lloyd. And then finally, we see the photograph was taken by the famous W.H. Tipton from Gettysburg, and was very prolific. You've probably seen many other photographs by him. So Rich Condon, who runs a really cool Facebook group called Civil War Pittsburgh, he did a little bit of preliminary work here and found some other interesting details. Notably, he pointed out that the 1880s era Army soldiers were men of Battery B, Pennsylvania National Guard. We don't know too much more yet, but that's a little bit extra information we didn't have. And also, John E. Marquis, we didn't know his name was John. We didn't know he was a private. So this tells us a little bit more that we can work with. So first step for me is going to be trying to figure out when this photograph was taken, and we can use that information to back up and figure out who these guys are in the photograph. So we have two good candidates from the back of the photo and from the front of the photo. The front of the photo shows these guidons and banners that say March 24th, 1892, very specific. The back inscription says 1894 or even August 1894. So I went to the regimental history for Hampton Battery, which is a really cool document, a book published in 1909. And I learned about why these two different units, this modern day unit and this 1880s era unit and the Civil War era unit, are interacting. And the regimental history says that the National Guard unit asked the veterans of the original Civil War era Hampton Battery to be taken up by the present light artillery organization located in the western part of the state of Pennsylvania. And so the Hampton Battery Veteran Association promptly agreed, formed a committee to work out the details. So there was a ceremony on March 24th, and according to the Pittsburgh Daily Post, 14 veterans of the original Hampton Battery attended the spring inspection of Battery B, bestowed an honorary name of Hampton Battery, along with two gifts, a beautiful guidon and a banner inscribed with a record of the Hampton Battery, both of which, of course, are visible in our mystery photo. So we know the significance of that date, and we know the origin of that banner and that guidon. However, it also says that the ceremony took place not in Gettysburg, but in the Battery's armory in Pittsburgh. So that tells us that's probably not when this photograph was taken or where it was taken. That leaves us with the other candidate. Maybe it's August 94. So let's explore that possibility. One of the other clues on the back there was the mention of the NG encampment, which is probably National Guard encampment. Now, wouldn't it be nice if there was some way to figure out when there were National Guard encampments on the Gettysburg battlefield? Oh, look, there's a Wikipedia article just about that topic. How convenient. This is surprising, but really helpful. We see that there's actually only one Gettysburg battlefield camp in August of 1894, and it is for the Pennsylvania National Guard, the 28th Infantry Division. It's called Camp Samuel Crawford from Pennsylvania Reserves. It ran from August 11th through August 18, and that fits really nicely with the rest of the story about why we might have Pennsylvania National Guardsmen there, why they might be at Gettysburg, and the August 94 inscription. So they actually have a lot of fun while they are having this encampment. The veterans of the Civil War Battery come up. I think there were 12. And we get a little bit of detail about what they did while they were in Gettysburg. This is a fun story. So these 12 veterans of Gettysburg, the original Hampton Battery, they attend a camp as guests of the Pennsylvania National Guard Battery B. One morning, the veterans took a ride with their men in the gun carriages to the base of Little Round Top. The veterans who had defended the top of that hill 3 decades earlier asked the captain to fire a cannon shot. He complied, though apparently it was no easy task to get the guns up through the trees. So they're just riding along, with cannons and just firing them off with these Civil War veterans. Once there, the pieces were unlimbered on the very ground where the old battery stood, and a national salute was fired. Again, okay, so they had a lot of fun. I think that's really, really fascinating and exciting to imagine that. And that gives us a pretty good idea about the source of this photograph. So let's try to figure out if we can learn a little bit more about who the individuals are. We have a pretty good guess about the location. We have a pretty good guess about the dates, at least the date range of this photo. Now, how about the guys that are pictured here? So let's start with the Pennsylvania National Guard soldiers. There are 10 of them. There's 8 on the left. There's 2 on the right. You can tell from their uniforms, they fit Pennsylvania National Guard uniforms from that time. They have the Keystone collar insignia. They have kepis, cross cannon insignia of artillery, letter B. They all have swords. There's 5 NCOs and 5 officers. And if we look a little bit closer at that uniform insignia, we see that the officers have shoulder straps. There's 2 second lieutenants, 2 first lieutenants, and 1 officer who you can't really tell what his shoulder straps are, but he's the one that's standing in the middle and looks like he's in charge of the whole thing. So my guess is that maybe he's the captain. That's my theory for the time here. So if we take a little bit closer look at that guy, and we look at the regimental history, we learn that it is in fact the captain of the modern day Battery B Pennsylvania National Guard. This is Captain Alfred Hunt. He's a very interesting guy. He was a prominent citizen of Pittsburgh. He studied engineering at MIT. He became an expert in mining and metallurgy. He joined the National Guard out of patriotic duty. And by one account, he was a nephew of Henry Hunt, the Army of Potomac's chief of artillery, and supposedly spent time in camp and, quote, saw active service, though only a boy. So he's supposedly milling around at the camp of the Army of Potomac. I couldn't verify that. But he was in several National Guard units. He worked his way up from private to captain, and as he moved around the country. And so here he's in command of this unit here. So that's Captain Hunt. How about these other guys? Well, it turns out you can find military records for Pennsylvania National Guard soldiers in the 1890s from the Adjutant General's office. Here is the record for 1894 for Battery B, and we can see, you probably can't see, so I've copied it over here, that there's 6 officers listed, starting with Captain Hunt, who we've already identified. And then we have Lewis Brown and Edward Eichenlaub and James Srodes as first lieutenants, and we have Alfred Marks, Alfred Lloyd as second lieutenants. Apparently it helped to be named Alfred if you wanted to get promoted in this unit. So taking that roster and the fact that we only have 2 second lieutenants pictured here, we can pretty confidently guess, that they are the 2 pictured here. However, the 2 first lieutenants are going to be a bit more of a problem because we have more than 2 of those. So now we need reference imagery. Where are we going to find photographs of these 1880s era National Guard soldiers? Turns out there is a newspaper article from 1899 in the Pittsburgh Press talking about this unit. And when we read the vignettes of these guys, we see that 3 of them were not in the unit in 1894. Remember, this article is from 5 years later. So we can rule them out. And then we have these remaining 4 images of officers that could be our guys. We already know about Captain Hunt. He's in the middle there. And then we see portraits of Lieutenant Eichenlaub, Lieutenant Marks, and Lieutenant Lloyd. Luckily, these 3 tend to match up visually as well. We already have the 2 second lieutenants figured out, so it's just a matter of putting them in the right order. It's one or the other. Eichenlaub is pretty distinctive, so we can draw that conclusion as well. But there's still one other first lieutenant who we can't identify. That's this guy standing sort of near the monument, and he doesn't fit the those other folks, but he could be one of the 2 remaining first lieutenants from the Adjutant General report. So remember this again. We figured out Eichenlau, Marks, Lloyd. The final candidate could be one of these 2 guys, but we don't know who is whom. What should we do? Let's see if we can find some reference imagery for these guys. So that's our mystery man. And he has 2 possibilities. He could be James Rhodes, or he could be Lewis Brown. Let's take a poll. Is it? Maybe not necessary. However, they do kind of look similar. So if you weren't sure, there is a fun little detail you could use here to figure it out. Indeed. Medal of Honor would be cool. This one is also cool. This is a GAR badge. So one of these officers is actually also a Civil War veteran. And only one of these 2 guys was. Lewis Brown was also a private in the 102nd Pennsylvania way back in the day. And Rhodes didn't start his military service until the 1880s. So that I thought was pretty exciting. Not only have we figured out who these guys are, but one of them is actually a Civil War veteran. And that brings us to the question of who the other folks are. So there's a bunch of NCOs. These, unfortunately, are harder to figure out. We don't have, I haven't been able to find reference imagery for many of them. However, I did note that the hospital steward here has the hospital steward insignia on his cap. So the odds are pretty good that he's Battery B's hospital steward, who's Thomas Wallace. Otherwise, we don't have a whole lot to go on there. Now, how about these fine gentlemen wearing civilian clothing that are very likely to be our other Civil War veterans? Well, unfortunately, once again, there's not a lot of information out there. We know that there are 4 identified reference photos of members of Hampton's battery out of the entire battery. 3 of them didn't survive the war, so it's a pretty good bet that's not them. We still want to figure out all we can. So I went out there to try to find all the imagery I could, even post-war imagery for Hampton Battery veterans. And there are a couple. This one is pretty amazing. This comes from a living history group for Hampton's Battery. The photo is dated September 11th, 1889. So this is 5 years before our mystery photo. And it's also documented in that regimental history book from 1909 that I mentioned earlier. After the photo was taken, the photo that you see here, the book says that they walked down to the peach orchard, select the site for the battery's individual July 2nd monument that would be put up 4 years later in 1893. I bet you've seen that. So in addition to the date, we also have all 22 individuals here identified with a handwritten caption, including Medal of Honor winner Caspar Carlyle. Unfortunately, it's not the clearest picture. I've never been able to locate the original. Maybe somebody here knows where it is. If so, I'd love to talk with you. It's one of the reasons I'm here today. But it's not good enough to really make out who's whom. In fact, we can't even tell which one is Caspar Carlyle and which one is his brother Benjamin Carlyle. Caspar got his Medal of Honor for saving a gun of the battery under heavy musketry fire, with most of the horses being killed and the drivers wounded. There is, however, another, so you can see the positioning here. There's one Carlyle there and another Carlyle up there. Not super clear. There's one other photo of these guys that I've been able to find from the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall in Pittsburgh. Here, they've actually identified all the individuals in this picture. One is Benjamin Carlyle on the left, and then Caspar Carlyle, Medal of Honor winner, on the right, or sort of in the middle there. So we have multiple post-war images we can use here. Again, I don't think we have quite enough to work with here to positively confirm the ones that we're trying to figure out, but it's a pretty good start. For example, you might feel some inclination that one of these Carlyles on the right matches up better with Benjamin or with Caspar. I think that may be a reasonable hypothesis. But then we have to figure out, is either these or both of these two guys pictured here? There's also some other identified soldiers, some veterans that we can use to figure this out. So we're to be continued here, but we have a pretty good start, and I'm pretty excited to see what else we might be able to figure out about these gentlemen. As for the unit itself, they have quite an interesting history. They went off, the Pennsylvania National Guard Battery went off to the Spanish-American War. They participated in the Puerto Rico campaign. Their battery got built up to 116 members. 4 of the 5 officers that were pictured in our mystery photo were served in that campaign. They used these 3.2-inch guns that you see pictured here. That's not them, but that's similar to the guns they would have used. And then they went back to Pittsburgh, and they were welcomed by a parade of veterans from the original Civil War Hampton's battery. And the leader of the battery, Captain Hunt, he wrote that should the battery ever be called into service, the men would carry out the proud tradition in which the old Hampton battery has made for itself. And I think that was true. However, there were costs. There were debilitating illnesses like malaria that the soldiers had to deal with and that they came back with. The first sergeant of the battery, Samuel Stewart, he died from pneumonia. Captain Hunt contracted malaria, and he ended up passing away a year and a day after the commencement of the war, age 44. He has a headstone in Pennsylvania's Allegheny Cemetery, Pittsburgh's Allegheny Cemetery. The epitaph is, "For the extension of the principles of liberty for which our republic stands, should we be ready to sacrifice, if need be, life itself," which clearly he was willing to do. There's various legacies for Captain Hunt. There's a foundation, philanthropic foundation named after him. There was an armory in Shadyside in Pittsburgh named after him. It's still there, but as of this year, it's now an ice rink. So people get to see his name every day as they go skating. And the battery is now the 107th U.S. Field Artillery, which is part of the Pennsylvania National Guard. And you can see from their unit insignia that their motto is Gettysburg to the Marne, which I think is pretty cool. So finally, in the last few minutes here, I want to talk about the future of Civil War photo sleuthing. And this is really building on the goal of trying to make projects like the ones I've been talking about easier, more successful, more accessible to a wider variety of researchers, and seeing if technology could somehow help with that. So I'll cut to the chase and tell you what we did, and then I'll back up and tell you why we did it. We created a website called Civil War Photo Sleuth. It's free. You can check it out right now at civilwarphotosleuth.com. And it's designed to help people find photos of Civil War soldiers, research and identify unknown Civil War photos that they have, and then contribute Civil War photos that they have that may be beneficial to other people. We launched this in 2018. It has 20,000 registered users today. We seeded it with 20,000 Civil War reference photos, mostly identified. Since then, our users have added 20,000 more. Photos from their attics, from their basements, from their collections, and from other public collections that they wanted to bring in. So we have almost, I think, over 40,000, 3/4 of which are identified, and it's led to hundreds of newly identified photographs. So how does it work? Well, we talked a little bit about Civil War photos, and we know that there's different formats. One group of photos, one set of formats is mass-produced, or at least produces copies. Cartes de visite, you would sit down, you get a dozen or half a dozen. Stereo views would be mass-produced. So if we're ever trying to identify one of these, the odds are pretty good that we will be able to find an exact match in some reference database somewhere else. So we need a technology called template matching that's just looking for an exact match. Show me the exact same photo, but maybe show me in a museum where they know the name and they know all about it. Then we have hard images, tintypes, ambrotypes, daguerreotypes. These are unique images. They're one of a kind, unless somebody made a copy in a book or something like that. And those are harder to identify, of course, because you're not going to find the exact copy in a museum or somewhere. You need to find another photo of the same soldier and then decide if it really is him, because they're going to be different images. So for there, we actually need a technology called facial recognition. And so that's what we decided to build into the site. We use face recognition. It does work on historical photos. You might be surprised to learn that. But of course, there are some unique challenges as well. They're black and white photos. Oftentimes they're damaged. They may be printed on paper, so there's not a lot of detail. But nevertheless, it does work. And it allows us to search a very large group of photographs very quickly and narrow it down to a small number of possibilities. Let me show you what that looks like. So here's a quick video of the system. You can add a photograph that you're trying to identify. Let's say you have a mystery photo. You're not sure who it is. You'd like to use the site and the artificial intelligence to try to narrow down the possibilities. So you type in where it comes from. We're trying to keep track of all the sources of this information. And then you're adding it to the site. It's going to ask you to identify those visual clues that we talked about. What do you recognize from the uniform? Here we see this is a Union officer. He's got eagle shoulder straps. Maybe other details that you can recognize. You'll describe those, and those will be used as search filters. Those will be used to narrow down possibilities. If this guy's a Union colonel wearing that uniform, we only want to see results of soldiers who held that rank at some point, including promotions and demotions. So those become search filters, and then you see the search results here, and they're going to be ordered by facial similarity. So all the results will be Union colonels, but the ones who are most facially similar will be the ones that you see first. It's not going to tell you which one is the match. Instead, it's going to give you a short list, and you as the human are responsible for looking carefully through each one and making a determination about whether you think it fits. Does the other information about that soldier's service record make sense? If he's in a New Hampshire unit and this photo has a Colorado backmark, maybe that doesn't quite line up. Those are the kinds of things you need to be considering here. If you do find a match, you can click the identify button and link those together. And so now both of those photos will be linked to that soldier's name and military unit and so on. So besides the technology, we also need, obviously, a lot of human expertise. Where did we find that expertise? People like all of you. We went to Gettysburg. We went to online communities on Facebook and different groups that specialize in this sort of thing. We went to collectible shows and antique shops and dealers and so forth. Anyone who would be willing to try out the system, we gave them a shot. Lots of folks helped us out. Thank you for doing that if you're one of the folks here today. And then, of course, we talked to the press. Anybody who would talk to us, we would talk to them, try to get the word out, try to let people know about this project. And ultimately, that'll get us more photos. So I mentioned that the AI alone, the face recognition alone, isn't good enough. And I think this little experiment kind of proves that. We did a test. We had 2 Union soldiers, 1 officer, 1 enlisted, 2 Confederate soldiers, 1 officer, 1 enlisted, 1 African-American Union soldier, trying to figure out what would be the top results from AI for each of these. So these are the top 5 results on the right here for these guys. And you can see just for these 5 examples, for 2 of them, the top ranked result from AI wasn't correct. Those are the red ones. So this guy was supposed to be the top result, but he was wrong. This guy is also wrong. The correct match is actually here, number 5. The correct match is here, number 3. In fact, if you get even more specific and you look at the confidence levels, you can see how similar they are between the number 1 ranked and the number 5 ranked one. So if you say, oh, he's first or second or third, you're really talking about hundredths of a point of confidence. So we don't want to rely completely on face recognition or AI. However, there's complementary strengths. AI is not perfect, but it never gets tired. It never gets distracted. On the other hand, humans have their own complementary strengths. They can match profile views that are really hard for AI. In the 1860s, it was popular to get a photograph of the side of your head. Kind of weird today, but very popular back then. AI struggles with that. Humans are pretty good. Humans can look at ear shape nose shape, skin discolorations or scars or hairstyles or facial hairstyles, all things that face recognition doesn't consider. One of our participants said, you know, I still think I could do the match better, but you just lose energy about it over time. Here's another test for you. Mystery photo on the left, AI results on the right. The correct match is actually, again, number 5. So, wrap up with a couple of Gettysburg success stories for you. The site has been used by lots of different folks, many private collectors, but also lots of public institutions, you know, museums, galleries, historical societies, and so on. Photo from a private collection. This one I love because the officer, Union officer here, has a Tyson Brothers Gettysburg backmark. So one of the photographers that was actually here during the war, but we don't know who he is other than that. Through the Civil War Photo Sleuth software, we're able to find a couple of matches thanks to images from the Emmitsburg Historical Society. One of them is, again, a template match, an exact match. This is not the same photo, it's another copy of the same photo. They also had another photograph of him, and it just goes to show how facial hair can trip you up, and it really can change a lot over the course of the 4 years of the war. This one has the gold standard period ink inscription with valediction. Yours truly, you know that's the photo of this guy. So this is a really nice a reference point for us to confirm ID. Can't do much better than that. We learned that he is First Lieutenant William Horner from Cole's Cavalry, 1st Potomac Home Brigade. He was born in Gettysburg. He grew up here. His unit was at Gettysburg, at the Battle of Gettysburg. I thought it was fun to bring the photo over to the monument, kind of reunite them in a way. Another example, this soldier, even harder to identify. Generic Union line officer, Washington, D.C. backmark. One of the hardest ones to figure out, almost as good as having nothing, because so many folks pass through there. However, thanks to computer vision AI, we're able to find an exact match on, from images from Wayne Jorgensen, the scholar of the 1st Minnesota. This turns out to be Captain Joseph Piriam, who was commander of Company K of the 1st Minnesota. He's got a super interesting story. He was killed at the Battle of Gettysburg in the famous action of the 1st Minnesota. And after he died several years later, they found some letters that he had written. And he wrote, "I am fully content that I shall never return from this war, and I'm entering the list with this conviction fully impressed upon my mind. I am indeed proud of the privilege afforded to me of offering up my life in defense of my beloved country." And indeed, he did give up that life. I also enjoyed bringing this photo over to his monument and also his burial site here at the cemetery. We've also done lots of identifications for public collections, as I mentioned. Here's a fun, just a range of some of the different organizations that we've identified images for. One of my favorite examples comes from the Library of Congress. They had this beautiful, I think tintype, maybe ambrotype, of a Union assistant surgeon with his medical staff sword. Really cool image, unidentified. With Civil War Photo Sleuth, we were able to find a match to a CDV in the Digital Maine Library, which is inscribed by Francis Marion Eveleth, who was the surgeon of the 7th Maine Infantry and 1st Maine Veteran Volunteers Infantry. You may know that the 7th Maine was also at Gettysburg. So I was really excited to see that the Library of Congress updated their entry for this unidentified photo and added the Photo Sleuth credit there. Feels like I'm making a difference in some way. That's the monument that's here at Gettysburg for the 7th Maine. So where are we going from here? Once we put the site up, not surprisingly, people started to look for matches, and they started to find potential matches, and they started to ask other people about their potential matches. So there's lots of interesting posts like this on social media every day of, hey guys, do you think this is the right person? And then you'll get the responses in the comments. Looks good to me. Or, asking useful questions like he's got the musician's herringbone pattern. So is that actually a soldier who was a musician, that kind of thing. But this is not particularly well structured. This is just happening in Facebook comments, which disappear and are hard to find later. So we thought we might be able to do better with that. We've been building tools to kind of help folks with this problem of navigating that short list of the really close matches where they could pretty much all be the right guy, and starting to be more systematic about looking at the different facial features. So with this tool, you can have 6 people do a really detailed inspection, looking at the eyebrows, looking at the facial hair, looking at the ears, and making a conclusion in a more unbiased way, combating that confirmation bias that we all have, because we want there to be a match. We want there to be a name behind the face. Something else that we're doing is integrating the trustworthiness of the sources into the overall identification. So if somebody says, I know this is John Smith because I saw it posted on Facebook or on Find a Grave, versus I saw this in the regimental history, those have different levels of quality. And not everybody is as familiar with how much more reliable some sources are than others. We did a survey of the Civil War photo community to get some hard data on those different sources and which ones are considered more or less reliable. We're building that into the tool now. So we consider things like a period inscription to be a primary source. We consider something that's in a library or a museum or in a book to be a secondary source, and that helps people kind of weigh these different, maybe even conflicting pieces of information. Finally, we're trying to get more folks interested in Civil War photos in general. You all are here, so perhaps you're already interested, but many others don't know much about it or haven't heard. So we created a tool called Civil War Twin that you can check out. And what this basically does is let you upload a photo of yourself and find your Civil War twin. Find the person who looks the most like you. This was a partnership with the American Battlefield Trust. Been a big supporter of us and Military Images magazine. We have lots of different images. We have men and women, different ethnicities, Confederate, Union, civilian, trying to let pretty much anybody who wants to use this site find some interesting matches and also learn about the soldiers and civilians that they're matching with. And along the way, a little bit about face recognition and AI. As you may know, it's becoming a bigger part of everyday life. It's not just being used in law enforcement, it's being used by advertisers, it's being used to unlock your phone. And not a lot of people have a lot of deep understanding about how this is working and where its limitations are and where its strengths are. So this is a kind of a fun way to get people thinking about how it works and actually get interactive with how it works. So thank you very much for your time. Some final thoughts. Photo sleuthing is as old as the Civil War itself. Even during the Battle of Gettysburg, there was photo sleuthing going on in the dead letter office in the years immediately following, and of course all the way up through today. The methods and the techniques have changed. We have community today. We have computation, technology today. But nevertheless, that need to learn about our history, to learn about the story of the Civil War persists to where we are today. I think the future of Civil War photo sleuthing is bright, but many challenges remain. I'll leave you with this example. Remember the dead letter office placard and how these photos hung in the post office when their identities were unknown and they were waiting for a recipient who never came. Well, today, of course, we can apply these modern photo sleuthing techniques to begin to rediscover their lost identities. This soldier, for example, is Lieutenant Charles Wakely, 5th Connecticut Infantry, who we were able to discover through the Photo Sleuth website, through the reference images that people like you and cultural institutions have contributed, and through technology, and through their persistence. With your help, I think we can build on the efforts of the original photo sleuths and continue their important work. Thanks for your time.
All right, Dr. Luther, thank you very much. Once again, you've got everybody going to go to Civil War Twin now and upload their images. All right, so, and we'll have you back when you get your book on this subject.
Perfect.
We'd love to have you come back and talk about it. Until then, at 4 o'clock, Dr. Brian Jordan will be in this room speaking about the Hard Luck Regiment, the 107th Ohio. He is signing books out there until shortly before he comes into this room. So 4 o'clock in this room, last presentation of the day, at least in this room. So we'll see you at 4 o'clock, okay? Thank you.